Welcome to a bonus episode of Hip Hop Movie Club. As always, here are your HHMCs, Boogie, JB, and DynoWright. Now here's a funky introduction of how nice we are.
All right, so in an effort to get to know us a little bit better, I thought it'd be nice to ask a question and we can go around and give our answers for the HHMCs. So the question here is, what are your first memories of hip hop music or hip hop culture? So for me, it had to be the early 80s. And I would just listen to the radio a lot at nighttime. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and Power 99 would come on at night on the weekends, and I would just hear these beats, and I was drawn in, and I was like, what is this? And I remember hearing the Roxanne Wars, the Roxanne Shante, Educated Rapper, and I just thought it was just hilarious. It was funny and creative, the way that they would go back and forth and just diss each other and all that. The one song that really stuck with me though, and I would just have it on repeat, and I had a record player, was Jam On It by Nucleus, which came out in '84. So I had that with all the different extended versions and whatnot, and I was hooked from that day forward. And that still remains one of my favorite songs. I think that was way ahead of its time with its celestial type theme. It was like aliens, there's all types of weird sound effects, and the rapping is good on it. So it just draws me in, and it's just something that just sticks with me to this day. I just think it's just a creative art form that is unparalleled. How about you, Boogie? What do you think your first ever encounters with hip hop music or culture?
It's an interesting question because I can't pinpoint an exact moment where I was exposed to hip hop, but I do know where that first encounter, where it happened. So growing up, I was the youngest grandchild with my father's side and my mother's side, and my mother's family is from Jersey City. For those who aren't geographically sound where Jersey City is located, it's exactly right across the Hudson River from New York. So as New York is jumping off, I have family right across the water who are catching the early waves of it as it crosses into New Jersey. So my older cousins, some of them significantly older, 3, 4, 5, 6 years older than me. Whatever they're listening to, I'm going to listen to. I'm the youngest one, so I'm kind of tagging behind them. And I remember hearing Planet Rock. Very good song, very catchy. I also remember hearing Rapper's Delight. I remember going through their room, and I remember seeing the jacket sleeves with the swirly Sugarhill logo on them. So I was very familiar with it, and I always loved that logo because it was so colorful and eye-catching. I was grasping the music in as they were playing it, and it was very interesting, and I loved it. But I remember the first song that really, really grasped me was Sucker MCs by Run DMC. That's probably the first rap that I actually started learning the lyrics to it. And I think what grasped me with Sucker MCs was because the Run DMC persona, as they hit the scene, they looked and dressed like people I saw walking up and down the street every day. They had the same look to them, whereas, you look at Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, you look at Africa Mambata and the Zulu Nation, there's these larger than life rock and roll personas. They have these big headdresses, they're leather clad, chains, whips, things going on. And I couldn't relate to that look because I didn't dress like that. But when I see Run DMC, and I'm like, oh yeah, they dress like my cousins. My cousins had the shell toe Adidas, and I never, to this day, I've never owned a pair. It's the funniest thing. But I remember seeing them, and I was like, I want to be like those guys. So I started imitating sucker MCs, and then now that I caught on to that. And then another rap, the early rap that I learned too was Dougie Fresh and Get Fresh, Crew Keep Rising to the Top. And I learned the lyrics to that one. I remember writing it down in like second grade, like, oh my God, I got to get this. And I kept singing it over and over in my head. And I literally had a page with the whole lyrics to it. I'm like, I know it. And then I would watch the video and then see if I actually had the words correct. Of course, I had a lot of them wrong, but so yeah, those are probably like about the earliest memories that I can grasp, because there's a whole lot of things muddled around, but those instances are what stand out in my head right now.
DynoWright, what are your first memories?
So the first memory I can think of is it's 1981. I'm 6 years old, and Apache by the Sugarhill Gang comes on, like their version of it. And I remember dancing around to it in my living room, and I'm 6. It's just fun, right? It's great music. And at the same time, my cousin Adrian, he was older, he was cool, he was into cool music, and he was breakdancing. I still remember, like, he had cardboard in his basement, and like his friends and I would be there, like, over his house, and they'd be practicing their moves on this cardboard in their basement. And then on the bus, like around that time, elementary school, around that time, middle school, the bus driver would play a lot of hip hop. He'd have the top 40 station. So I grew up near Philadelphia also, and there was a station called Hot Hits 98. And so you had Hot Hits 98 and you had Power 99, and they were both playing a lot of hip hop. And so you hear a lot of Run DMC and Beastie Boys, KRS-One, Boogie Down Productions, all that kind of stuff. But what really solidified it was a little later, 1990. My friend Joe asked me in the cafeteria, I'd watched Yo the night before. I said, what's Yo? And he's, Yo, MTV Raps. And so I watched it the next time it was on. And that's where I saw the video for I Left My Wallet in El Segundo by A Tribe Called Quest. And that's what really solidified my actual, like, I'm now a fan of hip hop. It wasn't just sort of something I absorbed from the air. It was like, wow, it was really clever. We can talk about A Tribe Called Quest beats like all night, but that's what really locked it in for me. Like, wow, this is really cool and it's different. And that's where I came from the hip hop standpoint.
Yes.
You know what's funny is that exact same song and album was a seminal moment for me as well. Even though I knew the early Run DMC stuff, I remember hearing the Fat Boys, again, the Roxanne, Nucleus, and all that stuff. When the Beastie Boys came out as well, I remember they were even on American Bandstand. And,
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what is this? And the Fight for Your Right to Party. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And I was like, these white guys too, like these guys that almost look like me, you know, they can do this stuff. It's crazy. And they were, I think they toured with Run DMC, you know, and then they had a similar beat style.
Yep.
And then, you know, so that was like 86, 87 when License to Ill came out, and I wore that cassette out. But then, yeah, Yo MTV Raps comes out on MTV, and I think it's Wednesdays with Ed Lover, and then the Saturdays, and I Left My Wallet in El Segundo by Tribe Called Quest comes on, and the lyrics were hilarious. Q-Tip was just so likable, and I would hear these one or two songs on these shows. I would go out and try to buy the cassette, or, you know, eventually the CD, or I would go to flea markets and try to find these and get the knockoff versions. But yes, People's Instinctive Travel and The Paths of Rhythm, the first album, or I had it on cassette, I could still have it here in 1990 from Tribe Called Quest. It blew me away. It was just so creative. Luck of Lucien and like those beats, it was just amazing. And I just fell in love with it. I remember going on a school trip at that time in middle school, and I was playing that on my Walkman, and I had like the splitter for the earphones, and me and my friend Kevin, we were just like listening to it as we walked the streets. I think it was in Boston. We had a trip, and I was just like, man, this is the stuff. This is the stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
That's so fun.
So fun.
Yeah, I remember. It's like I remember, like you were mentioning Yo MTV Raps. It's funny because being so close to New York City, there was a station like Public Access Channel 31 Like you had to like, it was like one of those UHF channels. And there was like a show that used to come on Video Music Box. And like, I think we've talked about it before. And like Video Music Box, it was so raw. VJ Ralph McDaniels, everybody refers to him now as Uncle Ralph, respectfully, because he was so seminal in bringing a lot of artists to the forefront. And actually, his model is kind of what transitioned over to what MTV would create as Yo MTV Raps. So like, I remember watching these videos like early, like way early, and they were so raw. Like somebody like filmed it with like a 8mm camera sometimes. But I remember like all of those old classic hip hop songs from back in the day, and every time a new video came out, the next day in school, everybody was like, yo, did you see the new video? Yo, did you see the new video?
Yep.
And I remember the very first time I heard Heavy D. And it was because I went over to my family. We went over to Jersey City to visit our family, and my cousin Hillary is like, hey, he's like, y'all know Mr. Big Stuff? And my sister Lydia and I were like, what? Mr. Big Stuff? Nah, we never heard that. So I think she might have recorded the video, and she puts the video on, and we're looking at it, and this guy, we're looking at it, he's so, and like Heavy D at the time, like he's a big dude, but he's so light on his feet. He's bouncing around, and like he's doing the dances with the backup dancers, and he's on point. And I remember that day like it was yesterday, because we were so hooked on this song. And like, I don't even think anybody else that we knew had heard that song. So we were like, we came back home, we're like, yo, you know Mr. Big Stuff? And they're like, what? Who? What? And like we had heard it, like probably hadn't even been out but like a day or something like that. But that Video Music Box was such a great show in that aspect, because he had such a connection with the record producers and the A&Rs, where they would send him videos to play just because of who he was, and they knew that he would put it on and people would watch the show because they respected him and they knew what he was trying to do. Yeah, that was one of the memories that I always remember too growing up, was that show Video Music Box. And then even more so when Yo MTV Raps came out, because now I had two shows on and I can watch one and then go right to the other one. It was like, nice. Wow, this is great. I was chewing it up, man. It was great. Those were good times.
You know what was so much fun about Yo MTV Raps was I felt like I was scouting the talent, because they would put this new acts or new to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, yep. That's where I discovered Nice and Smooth and Pete Rock and CL Smooth and Brand Nubian and Kwame. And I remember when Hammer came out and it was Turn This Mother Out. And I was like, oh, I love that beat. And he just comes out like a ball of fire in that song. Yeah. And I'm like, I went out and bought that right away, well before You Can't Touch This and before he became super mainstream. And it was like, I had one up on my friends or like the subculture, like, hey, I know this act. I heard this, I went out and I bought it. And now I started discovering their styles and different songs. I remember also getting, seeing Too Short. And I'm like, I got his tape and I didn't realize how vulgar a lot of that stuff was. Super vulgar. And when I play that in my room, I made sure to turn the volume down, like when my parents would kind of walk by. Yeah, it was fun to just kind of discover these guys from those shows. That early show, the Video
Music Box.
Video Music Box. I swear that would come up super late at night. I remember like a sleepover at my friend's house. It come on 1 or 2 a.m. And I think I remember seeing Jailhouse Rap by Fat Boys, because I just remember the scene. I think it was maybe filmed in black and white. And I just remember looking at that and cracking up. And early Run DMC, like it's like that, and that's the way it is, like before the Raising Hell album. So I remember those vaguely, but like it wasn't until like a little bit later, mid 80s, and then later that I really, got hooked.
Yeah. Originally, Video Music Box used to come on. Originally, it used to come on about like 3:30 or something like that.
Mm.
And then I guess money probably was the issue, and people pushing them back. It started coming on later at night. I think even like now it still comes on. It comes on like 1 o'clock in the morning. I caught a couple episodes probably over the last couple of weeks. I'm like, wow, this is still on. This is crazy.
Yeah, and you said there was a documentary about it recently.
Yeah.
And then I saw that Yo MTV Raps is back on Paramount Plus. I don't get that, but that's crazy. That's cool. It's coming back. Well.
Yeah, everything's retro, man.
Yeah,
everything is retro.
Yeah.
But it's funny, like I remember you mentioned that having those cassettes. I remember I was fortunate enough to have a double cassette recorder because I remember my parents were like, "Oh, what do you want?" You're like, I want a radio," and they were like, "Okay, we could use radio." Like, no, I want the one with the 2 decks on it. and then I had a friend that lived on a couple blocks over. He had one, and then like another friend. So we would all like one person would buy a cassette, and then we would all like kind of dub it off.
Oh, that's
we all have it.
That's good community.
I remember dubbing stuff for friends as well. You know what is funny too is these mixes would come on, or these songs, or when a hip hop song would come mainstream. As primitive as it was, as we used to do, is you hold the record and the pause button. So whenever they start playing a song, release the pause.
Yep.
Record it. But I would end up making my own remixes in a very primitive way. Like I said, is I would then pause certain parts and then release it when the chorus comes back on, or the hook. And the result was like a lot of repetition of the chorus and like different beats. So
look at you.
It was weird.
Producer.
Yeah, it was like without any of the turntable and technology and just a basic, radio with the one cassette.
Wow.
I was able to kind of do that. I remember doing that for some house music too, and like Samantha Fox and all silly stuff like that. Just like doing that. And then I'd play these back and I'm like, hey, it's not bad. Some of the stuff was annoying. Some of the stuff was pretty fun.
Wow.
My own remix. It's always the worst when the DJ talks over your song. Like after like 30 seconds into it, you're like, I finally got it. And then they start doing their own voiceover and you're like, please, come on now.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because the extended mixes of like Do What You Like by Digital Underground, like they actually like talk about, okay, you can start talking again, or right?
Yeah, at the end of the song, the section at the end, yeah.
I had the single for Me, Myself, and I by De La Soul. I wish I still had it somewhere. I had a few. I had a few singles of that nature.
Oh man!
I wish I still had that one.
Yeah, I used to have some singles as well because they were cheaper.
I might have it somewhere still.
Oh man, De La Soul. So when I was in elementary school, I had a friend that lived a couple blocks over, and his mother liked me, so I could be in the house while she wasn't home, and like vice versa. He could be over my house, So I remember the first time listening to 3 Feet High and Rising was at his house, and we put the cassette on. And we were immediately mind blown by this album. Like, it was so crazy. Like, I don't know how many times we played this album. Like, we played it. Like, I'm surprised that tape didn't pop. Mm-hmm. We played this album over and over and over and over again, to the point where I could probably like sit and like voice over some of the skits in between because we played it so many times. But
I think we talked about that before. They do like a trivia show throughout. Yes. I love that one too. And I have these 2 good friends I grew up with, Dave and Chris. We used to always do sleepovers at each other's house. We would listen to, here's what we do. We would listen to these, get these cassettes playing, like that one, Slick Rick. And then we'd play like Tecmo football tournaments, just like just nonstop. And we always have these inside jokes as well, like when we want to bust on each other. And the one comment was he's in one of the game shows on 3 Feet High and Rising. Mm-hmm. It was like blood-sucking leeches, just like your mama. And we would just come out and say that just for the heck of it. And it was like an inside joke between us because, again, that wasn't super mainstream. Me, myself, and I hit it big, but Potholes in My Lawn was the first video I saw from that album. And that has a sick sample and beat. And it's shot like in black and white, and it's really basic. But I was like, man, these guys are good.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, really, really, really sharp the way they put that together. I mean, they sampled Hall & Oates on Say No Go, and that just works. That works so well.
Yeah. I was a big Hall & Oates fan growing up anyway, because my mom was really big into them. Yeah. So I had Hall & Oates albums around the house. So when I heard that sample, I immediately was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to this day, that's one of my favorites. That's both versions, the Hall & Oates and the, De La Soul.
Yeah.
I sit there, I play around, and I'll mix from one to the other and go back and forth and cut it up a little bit. But yeah, that was a great sample right there with that one.
It's like ear candy. It's like ding, 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 ding. It's just so good, so good. And it's funny. I love that the next generation is seeing a little bit too. At the end of the new Spider-Man movie that just came out several months ago, they play 3 as a magic number at the end. And I remember my son, who's now 17, he looks at me and whatever, and he's showing me these videos of these kids, TikTok and whatever, like, what is that song? It slaps so hard. I'm like, it's like when you're emotional after seeing the movie, and all of a sudden that song comes on, and you're like, what was that? And I'm like, man, it's De La Soul.
Yeah, man. I almost fell out when I heard that come on when I was watching it. I was like, oh my God, really?
It was so perfect for the day.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
It's funny because, a lot of the music that, the three of us were really into in the 80s and stuff, that sampled a lot of music that our parents listened to. Like my dad had a lot of Bob James records and Earl Clue records and all that kind of stuff that was happening, like Dave Grusin and stuff in the late 70s. Like that was mined a lot for these hip hop records. And it's so cyclical because our parents' music made its way into the music that we listen to. And then now it's happening again. Your kids are listening to, are hearing songs that we first heard. And now it's like the third generation of it.
Yeah.
And I think hip hop and rap gets a bad reputation sometimes because of all the sampling that's done, because they're not playing live music in a lot of cases. But it, like you said, it carries these classics to the next generation. Otherwise, a lot of this R&B, jazz, blues stuff would kind of like die on the vine. And this stuff's now preserved. You have guys like Q-Tip that is just a connoisseur of those classics, and he would pick like incredible samples for his music. So I just think it's wonderful that this stuff's carried on.
Good music is good music. And so
absolutely.
Whether it came from jazz or blues or rock and it's remixed in hip hop, still good music. Like look at classical music, traditional Western classical music. It's been around for 400 years. It must be okay. My old boss used to say, it's been around for hundreds of years. It's probably pretty good.
Yeah, because I love some classical music.
Mm-hmm.
I will zone out to classical music in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, Looney Tunes samples that.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Like I see these producers and DJs and hip hop artists almost like mad scientists. They're in a laboratory and they're like, what works together? And we were just talking amongst ourselves about EPMD because it was the anniversary of Strictly Business. And I'm a fan of a lot of genres of music, and Steve Miller Band is one of my all-time favorites. That's just really chill. I've seen them in concert. Yeah. And on the one song, You're a Customer, he seamlessly intertwines Fly Like an Eagle with the Kool and the Gang's Jungle Boogie, and without missing a beat, and it just works. And there's so many of those, like, Tracy Chapman's Fast Car with, Nice and Smooth. Sometimes I Rhyme Slow, and I'm like, wow, that was just amazing, that the way they intertwine.
It's musical genius.
Yeah, it really is.
It is.
Yeah. And then you got that whole other faction of beats where they sample a lot of the JBs and a lot of that funk.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And James Brown and that whole sub catalog of funky beats. They take those break beats and they break them down to like, they put a couple of them together and it's almost unrecognizable sometimes because you'll hear part of the beat going and you're like, okay, I think I know what that is. But then they have a whole other layer on top of it where it's like, wow, how did they do that? Yeah. I always wanted to get into production, but I just never had the time because it's such a complex process that I figured if I couldn't really do it well, I wouldn't touch it. And I was fortunate enough with, some of the music that we've been playing for the podcast to have, that little small catalog of beats that I've made. But I always wanted to get, expand upon it, but I just never got around to it because my head is like all over the place with beats. Like literally, you see me walking, I'm walking like I have a beat in my head. And like when you listen to them, I'm like, yeah, I got this beat in my head.
Gotta spend a lot of time digging through a lot of crates,
Yeah.
finding little pieces you put together, and I respect that. Yeah. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
And to make it good, I mean, these are the best of the best, and there has to be a lot more underneath in the pyramid of it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like I said, good music is good music.
Good music is good music. Yeah.
Hip Hop Movie Club is produced by your HHMCs, JB, Boogie, and DynoWright. Theme music and all the music in this episode is by Boogie. Special thanks to Susan Berger, Tawanda Edwards, and Allison Yaris. Hit us up at hiphopmovieclub@gmail.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hip Hop Movie Club. You can also check us out at hiphopmovieclub.com. Season 2 of the Hip Hop Movie Club podcast starts next week. Your HHMCs will be breaking down Friday, starring Ice Cube, Chris Tucker, and a seemingly endless array of stars. Join in the fun and watch Friday before the episode drops. We found it on HBO Max, or you can rent it on Amazon Prime Video. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you won't miss this jam-packed episode. Shout out to you listeners. Thanks for tuning into this bonus episode of Hip Hop Movie Club.
Don't hate, cultivate.